This is the story of the Medals of Honor that were forgotten. The Medal of Honor represents the United States' highest military award. There are only about 3,500 recipients in our entire history out of tens of millions who have served. For most Medal of Honor recipients, the award process has been transparent and personally rewarding. However, for two recipients, Sergeant William Simon Harris and Private James McIntyre, their Medals of Honor were not issued for almost 120 years after approval at the direction of President Theodore Roosevelt. This was because the War Department sent their notification letters to invalid addresses in 1906 and then never followed up. Harris and McIntyre would die years later, never knowing that they had been approved for the Medal of Honor. On January 16, 2025, in an Army notification by telephone, the respective granddaughters of both of these two soldiers were notified that this oversight was finally being rectified and medals were being issued. How this oversight occurred and how it was finally overcome underscores the importance of the words of the late U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye, himself a Medal of Honor recipient, who once said, "There is no statute of limitations on honor. It is never too late to do what is right. A nation that forgets or fails to honor our heroes is a nation destined for oblivion." William Simon Harris and James McIntyre were both members of the famous scout troop known as Young Scouts, which was formed during the Philippine Insurrection of 1899. It was comprised of a small number of soldier volunteers at the direction of General Henry S. Lawton, a Medal of Honor recipient from the Civil War. Young Scouts served gallantly in fierce engagements throughout 1899, particularly in May 1899, fighting against insurgents with far greater numbers. On May 13, 1899, Harris and McIntyre and 10 other scouts fought valiantly and successfully as an advance force in the Battle of San Miguel against 200 to 300 enemy soldiers. Then, only 3 days later, on May 16, 1899, many of the same scouts engaged in a highly successful battle with 600 insurgents who were determined to burn a critical bridge near San Isidro. The scouts prevailed by driving the insurgents from their trenches, capturing the bridge, and holding their position as advancing American troops arrived. Lawton's report regarding the intensity of the battle at the bridge is noteworthy and dramatic. The enemy set fire to the bridge and retired to the trenches. Under heavy fire, the scouts charged across the bridge into the nearest trenches, routing the enemy. While the greater number of scouts were engaging the enemy in the trenches, a few, recognizing the extreme importance of saving the wooden bridge from burning, devoted all their energies to putting out the fire, and in doing so were exposed to the fire of the enemy until the latter were routed by their comrades. General Lawton was so impressed by the actions at San Miguel and San Isidro that he prepared two lists of scouts who were recommended for Medals of Honor. A few of the scouts, including Harris and McIntyre, were on both of Lawton's lists. A total of 21 scouts were recommended for the Medal of Honor. General Lawton was killed in action in the Philippines in December of 1899, but not before his written report with his two lists of Medal of Honor recommendations was submitted in September of 1899. For reasons not totally clear from the records in the National Archives, Lawton's September 1899 recommendations remained without action until January 1906. Then, Edward Lyon, one of the young scouts who served with Harris and McIntyre, inquired about the status of his Medal of Honor recommendation made by General Lawton 7 years prior. That inquiry triggered a War Department review, and 21 scouts, including Harris and McIntyre, were promptly approved for the Medals of Honor. Notification letters were sent to the War Department to each soldier indicating that they had been approved at the direction of the President, Theodore Roosevelt. Medals of Honor were issued to each soldier who received his notification letter. Unfortunately for Harris and McIntyre, they never received their notification letters, which had been sent to incorrect addresses. William Simon Harris was born on April 9, 1874. He enlisted as a volunteer on May 21, 1896, in the 4th U.S. Cavalry and joined Young Scouts in early 1899. Upon his discharge on January 29, 1901, Harris took a civilian job with the Manila Police Department in the Philippines. During that assignment, he was aware of the recommendations of General Lawton, and in 1902 he inquired as to the status of his recommendation. The War Department, with no detailed explanation, wrote Harris that there was no Medal of Honor for him. When the War Department in fact approved Harris for his Medal of Honor in 1906, they sent his notification letter to the Manila Police Department. But Harris was no longer employed there. Inexplicably, the War Department made no further attempt to locate Harris, who died in 1963 in Kokomo, Indiana, over 50 years after he was approved, never knowing of that approval. Remarkably, the War Department knew where Harris was during that period if it had only consulted government records. For example, Harris had a military pension, and there was a Veterans Administration record with his address on it. There is also an official record of Harris spending time in a U.S. soldier's home in 1933, as well as records of medical visits to federal facilities in the 1920s. The case of James McIntyre is even more perplexing in terms of War Department shortcomings. McIntyre was born on September 15, 1875 in Minnesota. He volunteered and enlisted in the 1st North Dakota Volunteer Infantry, and like Harris, he volunteered for Young Scouts in early 1899. As was the case with Harris, McIntyre never received the 1906 War Department letter notifying him of his Medal of Honor. The letter was simply mailed to him in general delivery, Fargo, North Dakota, where he had enlisted. The envelope was returned as unclaimed. And again, as was the case with Harris, the War Department made no further efforts to find McIntyre. They could have. For example, on September 12, 1918, McIntyre registered for service in World War I, although he was not called to serve. His registration card contained his address in Chugwater Platte, Wyoming. McIntyre was also a pensioner and lived in a volunteer soldier home in California from 1923 to 1925, where he was treated for rheumatic fever and chronic tonsillitis. Following his discharge in 1900, McIntyre returned to Minnesota. After marrying, he moved to Chugwater, Wyoming. Life as a farmer was difficult for McIntyre, and tragedy followed, with the death of his wife in 1919 and the death of a son shortly thereafter. McIntyre sought a new pursuit in life in 1930 when he moved to Columbus, New Mexico. There, he started a freight and messenger service between Columbus and communities across the border in northern Mexico. On May 26, 1930, during one of his business trips, McIntyre was robbed and murdered by 2 Mexican outlaws. He was shot 5 times at near point-blank range. While his murderers were eventually captured, the Mexican police found his decomposing body only several days after he was killed, and his body buried but unaccounted for somewhere in Mexico. Recent privately funded efforts to locate his body to be returned to the U.S. as a Medal of Honor recipient have failed. Only one soldier who served as part of Young Scouts in the May 1899 battles was killed. His name was Private James Harrington. While holding only the rank of private like the other scouts, Harrington took a leadership role amongst his fellow soldiers who respected him immensely. Harrington fought in both the battle at San Miguel on May 13, 1899, and the San Isidro battle on May 16, 1899. Tragically, he boldly proclaimed the night before the San Isidro battle that the bullet had not been made that would kill him. The next day, he was shot and died shortly thereafter. When General Lawton arrived at the scene of James Harrington's body, he ordered an American flag placed over it. In his official report, Lawton stated, "Harrington killed, the only casualty. He is the man who has served several times before and been commended for unusual bravery. He was as noble and brave a soldier as I have ever known, and his death will be a great loss to us. Harrington was on the original Medal of Honor list prepared by General Lawton, but his name did not appear on the 1906 War Department approval list because he had been killed. His name was struck from the review process under the Army's then prevailing killed, no medal policy. While the injustice in that policy was recognized when an official rescission in 1918, at the time of Harrington's service, the stated Army policy, according to the Adjutant General, was the Medal of Honor cannot be awarded in the case of a deceased soldier, no matter what measure of gallantry he may have displayed. Private James Harrington, despite his gallantry and Medal of Honor recommendation, was like many other soldiers, a tragic victim of the Army's killed, no medal policy. The research used in this video regarding William Simon Harris, James McIntyre, James Harrington, as well as numerous other instances of injustice and failed Department of War actions regarding the Medal of Honor is contained in a 2025 book by Michael Everhart entitled The Medal of Honor, Its Dark Sides. This book is available free online at www.medalofhonorhistories.com.